podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Ospreys Eyrie.
So I'm going to read you a quote to start from Jacques, World Cup winning coach last year. In my head, I'm currently full-on Ospreys. And I think that is exactly how I feel. And most people listening to this, the Ospreys Eyrie podcast, feel most of the time. And indeed, while you're doing it, we're just here to fill your ears and indeed the rest of your head via your ears with Ospreys thoughts. I'm Robbie, or Squidge, whatever you call me, joined as ever by Iestyn. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm all good. One thing I've just learned and noticed from Zoom meetings is that when someone presses the Zoom meeting's been recorded, you can actually leave the meeting. That would be one horrific misclick instead of pressing OK next to it. But yeah, I'm all good. And yeah,
done that.
That's it.
I could have just tried to fill for an entire hour.
It would be very awkward for the person that's just pressed record, and then it depends how many people are in the meeting, I suppose.
Yeah.
Everyone just pressed the wrong button and left.
Suddenly you drop right down. It's like the injury list building up. James is not here, but the baby has been delivered, is here with us, which is really exciting. Congratulations, mate, if you're listening back. Yeah, amazing news. And we don't have a third person joining us this week. It's just the two of us, ready to talk about the complete lack of Ospreys news, a little bit about the Bulls game that took place, and then the Leinster game that is coming up this very weekend. And also, I think it's probably high time for a good player. I think it's probably worth doing a good player.
Yeah, everyone's had the week off of a good player. There is a bit of a coincidence by the fact that we weren't recording last week after the Bulls game. That the people just got busy, which was fair enough. And we weren't trying to avoid this rather hefty defeat. We just all got a bit busy. So yeah, don't shoot me, please. Thank you.
Should we talk briefly about the Bulls game before we do what little news there is? Because it didn't go according to plan, I think is fair to say. It stung, but also I feel like I'm not alone and feel like we got over it quite quickly. You know, there's been a lot this season that has gone so much better than we expected. You know, you remember the start of the season when the Scarlets went out and had the first two games of South Africa, and they broadly went like that. And they were 60-odd point hammerings. And there was a kind of vibe of, well, this is how it's going to be for the Porsche regions, you know? And so to have gone out there and won 2 of the 3 games played in South Africa, to have beaten the other team that came over, or 2 other teams that came over, and then to have had one game like that still feels like a pretty good result on the whole.
Yeah, you know, you mentioned the Scarlets there. You know, they give 60-odd points against the Bulls. I think the Dragons lost 69 something to the Jacques in November. That was a weird game, that was, which was just topped off by Lukanyam just running in on a post from about 40-odd meters. And it kind of like felt like those results was going to be what the Ospreys were going to have when they travelled out there. And, you know, the Stormers and the Bulls, 2 very good sides. And, well, especially the Bulls after what everyone has seen over the last few weeks. And yeah, you kind of felt like the both games out in South Africa were going to be, you know, if you could sneak a point here and there, you'd be rather happy. But they come away from the tour with 5 points. You know, Leinster didn't do that.
Yeah.
You know, there's not many things that Welsh sides have got over Leinster, but the Ospreys managed to get a win out in South Africa and Leinster didn't. Okay, Munster, they like to win in South Africa for some whatever reason. And but yeah, I think you kind of see what the Ospreys were trying to do in some elements. You know, when you give away 2 interceptions tries like the way that they did, you thought that's unfortunate. And you know, maybe on the positive spin of it, they were rather unfortunate not to get that 4-try bonus point. And on the negative spin of it, you've given away 60-odd points, which is a bit of a kick in the teeth. But
yeah,
on the balance of it, to get one win out in South African League, one in Europe, and then 2 wins at home in the league. It's definitely what. Well, I certainly didn't expect that at the start of the season, so
Yeah.
it's a definite positive.
And I think going into that 2 game tour, I think if we'd come out of it and we'd got a try bonus point in both games or a losing bonus point in one of them, you would have been happy with that. If they'd got 2 or 3 points out of this tour, that would have been a good result. So to come home with 5 feels, and to have then been gutted as well, because the Bulls put out their strongest team pretty much. You had Villy LaRue, you had Kane Moody, you had Curtly Aronson, you had players that were playing in a World Cup final a few months ago, starting for them, and they didn't underestimate us at all. And in some ways, when Toby Booth talked after that Stormers game about one of the aims of the season was to gain respect, they've very much done that. And sometimes gaining respect means they put out a bunch of World Cup winners and you lose by a big margin rather than playing their B team and perhaps getting a bit closer. And that is just a stage on the journey, I guess, for this team that they've got to kind of overcome. And I trust them to do that, and I feel like this wasn't a game that is indicative of how this is going to go. I think it was a one-off match where some things didn't click, and they very easily could have got that bonus point. There was a couple of decisions to kick points that you question maybe, and then there was obviously the 2 moments at the end. There was a Villiers interception try, and then the kick that went dead from Owen Williams at the end, which could have been an extra point. It could have been an extra point on the table. It could have been really important, but wasn't to be. There is a worry as well. It ate away at a points difference, which was looking pretty healthy, and now much less so. So you've got to hope maybe those Dragons and Cardiff games to be able to, perhaps pick it up a bit and get it back into the positive figures. But yeah, weird one because you kind of gutted at the time, but it didn't take long to get over it, I felt.
Yeah, well, I was working at the Principality Stadium
Oh, of course.
on the day because you had the Wales-Italy women's game, and you had the 3 women's finals, and throughout the afternoon and the evening. So I switched on my laptop and put on S4C Click as I tend to do whenever I'm not at home in front of a television, and I just switch it on and I see Reece Henry, the Ospreys building up a few phases, and Reece Henry gives an interception pass. I'm thinking, all right, there we are. That kind of sums up the afternoon. It doesn't look like it's gone to any sort of plan. And then I switch it off, and it's half time, and when one of the games are kicked off. So brief little look during one of the games, and I see that the Ospreys are building pressure inside the Bulls 22. And all of a sudden, here comes Willie LaRue and pinches another interception. And I thought, right, that kind of sums up the afternoon just by that
Yeah.
2 minutes or so that I saw live. And then, well, I got over it Sunday morning. I just sat and watched the game because, sides like the Bulls, they are so powerful up front, but their backs can do so much damage as well.
Oh, yeah.
Someone like Willie LaRue, someone like Moody, and just wasn't to be, I suppose.
Yeah. I did feel a bit cheated that I spent years championing and defending Villy LaRue when he's had one of those players that is rated incredibly highly across the world, but for some reason South African fans, his own fans, don't get him. Those players come along every so often, and I spent a long time defending South African fans. No, this guy's brilliant. LaRue is brilliant. You need to rate him properly. Like World Rugby asked me to do a team of the decade in 2020, and I had him in at fullback. And him to then betray me like that. I felt so upset and hurt personally, like he'd done it just to upset me. But hey, he's brilliant. He's a brilliant player, and yeah, no hard feelings, none held. Would have been a useful point, but I don't think it wasn't a must-win game, and we'd kind of come out of that last period better off. So yeah, I feel that about sums up that game. I feel.
Yeah, I think it does.
Oh, Reece Henry's break though for the opening try, for Luke Davis's try,
and the offload as well,
and the offload.
The 2 offloads that come following it is
gorgeous.
Rather good. Yeah.
And Keelan's finish as well, also brilliant. Just going to pick up on the positives. But yeah, always, even within the games where they've struggled this season, there's always been really positive moments. Like last season, there were still the Ulster and Munster away games where they were struggles and nothing really clicked. And even this season, when that's been the case, there's still been, little shining moments. And Dewi Lake getting back as well on the field was also fantastic to see.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure Jack Morgan is in around the warm-up as well. I saw a few photos online. obviously great to see Dewi Lake back as well. So yeah, they're all slowly coming back to play, which is a timely boost at the end of the season.
Yeah. So I think to lead on to news, there isn't much, but the big piece of news I guess we're largely expecting is there's a lot of talk around Jack Morgan being back this weekend to play Leinster potentially. The Osprey said that was the target, that was the goal for him to come back. It sounds like he's going to be on track to at least make the bench, which would be really exciting and a really big boost going into those final few games and potentially the playoffs beyond that.
Yeah, and it kind of makes my head go back to a game against Leinster from 2023,
Hmm.
where Leinster had Van der Fleer on the bench,
Oh
just
yeah. Oh yeah, yeah,
casually,
yeah.
casually as you like, just have James Ryan and Van der Fleer on the bench. And well, that game they won by 5 points or something,
Hmm.
and Hugo Keenan scored a try which kind of like swung momentum completely, and the Ospreys couldn't really get back into it. But kind of like feels like that in a way. To have that international experience from the bench could be similar with Dewi Lake as well,
Yeah.
maybe off the bench again. And yeah, it's all positive to see the co-captains from the last World Cup, a few months ago now, all
Hmm.
both back in contention.
Yeah. And he is one of those players, like, I mean, Sam Warburton was a bit like this, where there are some players who are brilliant international players who perhaps, when they come back into club rugby, it's more like a way of keeping them warm to go and play for Wales. And Jack Morgan's never been one like that, Ever since he got into that Wales team, and even since he's taken the captaincy, he's been brilliant. He's really stood up for the Ospreys. And just like chatting to him on the sideline before that Munster game, he was so up for it and so excited about it. And he clearly loves this team and loves this group. And I'm really excited to see him play in the black shirt again, or white as I'll probably be wearing on Saturday night. But yeah, he's also, again, when he came back from that injury post World Cup, he was brilliant. He came straight in against the Dragons off the bench and was one of the best players in what was an otherwise quite rough game. And the difference he can make, instantly is huge. And I'm, yeah, really excited to see him back. Just a hero and a kind of favorite player, I think, to most of us who are like Jack Nynaber, thinking about the Ospreys a lot.
Yeah,
Um,
it gives a massive selection headache for anyone
yeah.
who wants to pick a back row this week. Well, certainly Toby Booth, because you've got three excellent open sides, and okay, Jack Morgan probably will be on the bench this week, but by the end of the season, once a bit of match fitness gets into him, you've got
Mm,
three very talented open side flankers there with the rest of the back row as well. And it certainly makes for an interesting selection.
yeah.
Quite interesting to see what goes on in that back row this weekend.
Though there is slightly less positive injury news, which is there is talk of Adam Beard having a knock, not serious, but potentially, being out this weekend, maybe the Dragons game as well. Which wouldn't be great. Might mean James Ratty moving up into the second row and kind of allowing, partnering with Hugh Sutton. Sort of James Fender being back for those, hopefully the Cardiff game, possibly the Dragons, and that would alleviate some of that problem. But yeah, again, Adam Beard would be a big loss considering Leinster are missing James Ryan, who just doesn't want it, just isn't interested. And so to not have, the only look, there won't be a Lion second row, as you correctly pointed out on Twitter. There won't be a Lion second row playing if Adam Beard doesn't make it. So would be a loss.
Yeah, it would be a loss for all neutral supporters not having a British Irish line second row at either side. It'd be rather upsetting. But yeah, it's very very rarely you see Adam Beard injured, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's one of those that they always look in the team sheet and you always expect to see him there. Well, especially for the Ospreys, you expect to see him in that starting 15, especially under Toby Booth.
Mm,
But yeah, it would be a shame. There's opportunities for other players to develop.
mm,
Ratty's been brilliant this year,
yeah.
regardless of where he's played. And it would have been nicer if we had Fender back a week early, but it doesn't seem to be the case. But it's a really good opportunity for Hugh Sutton if
Yeah.
he gets a start. All right, a very tough place to go, admittedly, in Dublin, but one experience that would be for a young second row to go out there and play and start out in Dublin.
Yeah. And what a game he had in similar tough circumstances in the Stormers, and to be able to back that up as well could be huge.
Yeah, and even provided a jackal threat out
Yeah,
of nowhere in
out
the
of
second
nowhere.
half out in Cape Town. So yeah, it's a brilliant opportunity for him. If Ratty
Mm.
joins him in that second row, then that'll be good to see. And then you're kind of looking at maybe a Tipuric Deeves in the back row with
I
Morris. It's
I feel
one of
like
those.
this game has Harry Deves written all over it. This feels like a game for him to be scrappy and just kind of drag Leinster down from, they'll be on a high after reaching a European final. And he'll be like, no, we're going to play this like it's the Brewery Field. We're going to play this, my way. And this feels like a Harry Deves man of the match game to me. The Ospreys are going to be good. It feels like the kind of game where he will step up.
Yeah, it's similar to a game a couple of seasons ago where the Ospreys lost like 29-7. I
Mm,
can't remember if Steve started or came off the bench. I think he might have started because Danley did come off the bench. So it's like his first game back from a long-term injury. And Deeves was, you just see a yellow cap blurring around the field everywhere. And it was kind of like one of his first starts after the Sale game where he scored.
yeah,
And yeah, it's another really good opportunity for another young player. So
yeah.
it'd be good to see him in the mix, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of someone else that's been sort of in the mix, but less so, the one big bit of Ospreys news this week is Toby Fricker, USA squad, which not words I think any of us had down because when he signed, this time last year, and he came in, it was as an English winger who is Welsh qualified, having played in the Premiership for a long time as an English qualified player. And you're like, oh, brilliant, he's qualified for Wales, He had that one game against the Sharks where I thought he was great. I thought he was really good. Then picked up an injury, I think either towards the end of that game or in the week following, and hasn't played since. And now we hear the news that out of nowhere, he has been called up by the USA Eagles, their national team, to be in their wider, 54-man, I think, squad, which has come completely out of nowhere. There was talk around Jack Walsh potentially playing for the Eagles because he was born in the USA, as someone once sung. But yeah, nothing on Toby Fricker. Yeah, out of nowhere, there he is in the Eagles squad.
Yeah, it came as a bit of a surprise for I think everyone involved. Well,
Yeah.
probably a few people involved at the Ospreys as well, let alone any supporters that they probably weren't expecting the news. It just came as a bit of a surprise. You're thinking, all right, English winger, Welsh qualified, played a little bit of the Welsh Premiership with Ebbw Vale before he went to Bristol.
Mm.
Now all of a sudden he's going to be within a shot of a USA squad, which is rather huge.
Yeah. Would you be amazing for him? And, I've said it before. I feel like this squad's been missing a kind of Jeff Hassler or Blaine Scully type, like tier two back that we can all get behind. And it's not coming the way I thought it would. But, that kind of cult hero status potentially. There is the question, though, around him now being a non-Welsh qualified player. If he wins a cap, he's suddenly added into that count. And we are well below that count, now that Tom Boat is qualified. There's some talk of Max Nagy probably isn't qualified, but he might be. So that's a unusual one. Jack Regan's now left. So who we left with as non-Welsh qualified players? Sort of Will
You've got
Hickey,
Will Hickey.
Jack Walsh.
Is that it? I'm trying to.
Yeah, and I guess it's then the boys in on loan, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
Boshoff isn't Welsh qualified, and Sekakete, who is gone now. So yeah, Chris Moore, I guess, isn't Welsh qualified. Don
yeah.
Morris,
I
but
believe that. Well, Don Morris has gone back to Saracens, I
right, okay.
believe. Yeah. So I think it's just Chris Moore as well added
Oh,
onto that list. So I think probably one or two short in terms of the maximum amount that
yeah,
you could have in a squad. So yeah, it's a really good opportunity for Fricka, and if he gets in there and gets a cap, that's quite cool.
mm,
Um, reminds me a little bit of Hannah Dirksen in a way when he was either a non-capped USA game or something like that
yeah.
that he played in. I can't remember who or when it was, but it was a long time ago. So it kind of gives me a little bit of flashbacks to that.
And his brother went on to play for the USA as well. Hannah Dirksen's, brother. Man, Hannah Dirksen. Oh man, I can't wait for him to come up in more good players. What a player! What a guy. Um, the other bit of, I guess, Ospreys related news that isn't really Ospreys news is Dragons news. The Dragons have had a lot of news this week. It's been a really big week for the Dragons. They've made some really strong and interesting signings, some signings that are very encouraging. But they've made two in the backroom staff as well. One today they brought in from the Welsh Rugby Union, new head of fitness. And most interestingly, yesterday, Tiatia, Ospreys legend, one of the greats, as their new defence coach.
Yeah, and it came as a bit of a shock, I think, for
Mm.
quite a lot of people, Osprey supporters, Dragon supporters as well, and a great back rower for the
Mm.
Ospreys during the Galactic Week and inspired quite a lot of players. You go around asking some of the younger players that were coming through at that time, they would have said how much of an influence Tiatia had.
Yeah.
And it's a bit of an interesting one because I'm pretty sure his last role with Moana Pacifica was forwards coach.
Oh,
I
okay.
might be wrong, but I'm I'm convinced it was, unless I've told myself a really blatant lie. But yeah, but then again, Filo Tiatia is the defense coach. If your side's not
Mm.
making ridiculously brutal tackles, then is Filo Tiatia really your defense coach? Because you're thinking about it that man could just hit people very hard. And the thought process that went through my head when I saw the announcement,
Mm.
what style the Dragons are going to turn up to next season? Is it going to
Yeah.
be? I just can't imagine it being like a drift defense and trying to soak up pressure. I'm waiting it to be full on Springbok blitz. Just get out there and just stop that man. Just sometimes even getting up from the floor, let alone
Yeah.
making any move.
It feels almost less like a Springbok Blitz and more like a fight in a pub car park. Like I'm expecting proper brutality from it. I'm really excited. I feel there's an awful lot of us, probably most fans of the other three regions, look to the Dragons as our second team, as the other team we want to do well. I'd love the Ospreys to finish top of the league. I love the Dragons to be second every season. And the thought of them being boosted, because I think the thing they really needed this season. And if you look at their Connacht game the other week, where they were fantastic and they would have deserved to win that game if they could have done us a favour. But at points, their defence wasn't there, and that's let them down a few times. And I think there's been a lot of kind of less organisation and more kind of the mental side, which I think Sean Edwards has talked about as a lot as the biggest job of a defence coach is to get the right mentality into them. And there were sometimes when they concede one try, the defence will then soften up on the next kind of set of phases. And that is a mental issue. And Tiatia is the sort of guy who will terrify you into being that way. But also, I think he's probably a more three-dimensional coach. You mentioned, yeah, you're completely spot on. He was a forwards coach in past and was even briefly forwards coach of the Japan national team as well. So it has a pretty strong CV. And it was also infamously around the time of Alan Clark was linked with the job before Toby Booth got it to be the Ospreys head coach. So again, has a strong CV, almost came back to Wales there. And yeah, I'm really excited to see what he can do with this team because it's what the Dragons need. It could really be something to turn them around. And hopefully he can keep his soft spot for us when we visit Rodney Parade next season. Because the thought of the Dragons being as good as they always are when we turn up, but with an even better defense is terrifying.
They'll probably just have Filo Tiatia just pop up in random places next season while the game's going on, just to put real fright into any away fan or player that's turning
Yeah.
up there. It's a really interesting tactic that I think the Dragon should really delve into a little bit more. Just pop him up either on the big screen or wherever, or maybe just dot him around the terraces or something, and just get him just an eyeball like the tech. Like you would be making mistake after mistake if Fila Tia was just looking at you.
They can do the sort of loophole that South Africa used to do with Ninaba, where because he was a qualified medic, they'd sometimes get him on as the medic to help with the defensive line. Just get him on, have him qualify as a referee and see if you can get away with it. Just sneak him onto the pitch somehow. Other thing, right? Philo Tiatia and Justin Tipuric played together for the Ospreys. And Tipperick's still going, and Philo's now 52 in defense coach, having had a long spell out in other countries, having coached in Japan, New Zealand, Australia. So yeah, I mean, it just draws home how long a career Tipperick's had. But
Yeah,
yeah,
and, they probably bump into each other at some point next season, and there'll be some very interesting rugby discussion going on. But
yeah.
that'd be something I'd really want to just ear drop in, just to see what rugby chat they would talk about. It could be about anything.
That'd be amazing. The other point on Fila Tiatia is he has two twin daughters who are now 16 and have, from what I understand, were very good netballers who have just taken up rugby and were both born when he was at the Ospreys. So there's potentially, again, the Ospreys women's team starting up. You've got the Welsh team as well. They're looking at, development opportunities. Same thing as Cecilia Tuipulotu at 16. She moved from netball to rugby and was instantly brilliant at it. I don't know. There's potentially two twin Tiatias who could pull on a different red shirt in the years to come. Or, if Lance Bradley gets his Ospreys women's team going, maybe they're the first people we target. I just think that's something that's flown under the radar a bit of like, oh, that could be interesting if the women's team could poach those two. Not to get too excited about two people I haven't seen play rugby before and have barely played, but
Just writing that down, actually, having two Pelotu and two tiers, either in
oh,
the same 15, despite all the money and the contracts that England have currently got,
and
that would be frightening to come up against for any
look,
side.
Willis Halaholo's daughters just start playing rugby as well, start the season. So chuck her in as well. That's a team. That's a team. Tuipulotu. And there's two Tuipulotu. There's another Tuipulotu coming through. So two Tuipulotus, two tiers, and a Halaholo. That is the Wales team I want to see. That'd be glorious. Um, so is that about all of the news?
I think so, unless
Oh,
anyone's got
well,
anything. I
there's
haven't.
no news, but there is a rumor.
Oh, here we
Um,
go.
that is the correct reaction. There's a lot of talk coming out of Exeter that Joe Hawkins has not settled, is not that happy, and is perhaps looking to leave. And there's further talk that he might be heading back to Wales. And I don't know where. We don't know where. Um, James has shared literally just 10 minutes before we started recording that there's perhaps talk of him going to the Scarlets, which would be gutting if because we never would have lost him to the Scarlets without him going to Exeter in between. But there we go. Um, would you welcome Joe Hawkins back if he came back, having left last year?
Well, first of all, it's pure speculation to begin with.
Yes.
Who
Yeah,
who knows? That might be just Rob Baxter playing tricks again, like he did
that's
last
true. Yeah.
year, weirdly. Um, but if that situation was to come, I think it's quite a bit of a tough one because you look at the fly half chart, you've got someone like Owen Williams, Jack Walsh, Dan Edwards, Luke Scully. You're thinking there's not much room for more.
Yeah.
In that
Yeah.
12 chart, you've got Hugh Williams, Watkin can shift in if needed, but I'm seeing them more as a 13 at the minute, regardless of what shirt number they've both got on the back
Yeah.
at the moment. And you're thinking there might be scope for maybe one more there, but you
Hmm.
know, you're looking at the partnership with the Cheetahs as well. If you managed to tie in Ivadi Boshoff for another few games every season, you're thinking, do we need another centre on top of that?
Hmm.
It's kind of one where you'd be happy to see him back, but does he fit in realistically,
Yeah.
especially with budget cuts, coming down from 5.2 to 4.5, and especially with all the rumours coming in so late in the season as well, you kind of
Hmm.
feel like everyone's kind of nearly finalised the squads for next
Yeah.
year. If this came out in August or September, just as the season would get underway, you're thinking, oh, okay, you might be able to plan ahead a little
Yeah.
bit. But with it coming so late in the season, there's only a couple of games left of the regular season, and you're trying to think logistically. You're thinking as much as you'd like to have a homegrown player, come back
Hmm.
to within the region or back to Wales, as a lot of Welsh rugby supporters apparently want nowadays. And it just one of those where you think, does the numbers add up? And that's
Yeah.
the only point that I've kind of got. But in terms of would I want him back, I think it probably would be a really good addition to have a little bit of versatility with someone playing
Yeah.
10 or 12 as well.
Yeah. That's it, isn't it? It's can you make the numbers work? Can you make the sums add up? Because he'd be very much welcome back. I think we had a very small squad, and the sheer number of minutes that Kieran Williams and Owen Watkin have had to play this season, and Avadi Boshoff coming in has been a huge relief to them because suddenly only one of them has to play at a time. We're not flogging them constantly every game, has been the case. They've played probably, without having checked this necessarily, but probably more minutes than any other centre combo in the league. It certainly felt that way, kind of casually watching. And I did a comparison of the minutes Ospreys players have played to Leinster, and it is across the board. We've got, I think, 9 or 10 players that have played 1,000+ minutes. And Leinster have two. I think it's Frawley and Lama are the only ones in their squad this season. And yeah, it's kind of huge. We've got, yeah, both Keith and Watkin have played over 1,000 minutes this season, which having someone to alleviate that would be great. Having, as I say, you can also fill in at 10 if we need it. Would be a huge addition. And also, I think the interesting point on that is there was some talk when he left of, well, it'd be great for his development to go and play in a different league and play in a different environment and play in a team who wins and whatever. And actually, if he then comes back and he goes, well, no, the best place for my development is here at the Ospreys, that is a huge statement on how good a pathway that Booth and company and Ruddock and Mark Jones have built. And it might be big for keeping the likes of Jack Morgan and Dewi Lake and Morgan Morris, and then this younger generation underneath, the James Fenders and the Morgan Morsers and so on of the world, Dan Edwards, when it comes to it, keeping them to stay and going, actually, we had one of our number go and it didn't work out. And there's kind of he's living proof that the grass isn't always greener on the other side. And it feels like there's a really special environment from the outside and everything you hear from the inside. But if we see someone leave and go, oh God, no, actually this isn't, it isn't all made of roses. I don't know. It could be a real boost for the Ospreys for a number of reasons if he came back. As well as you say, being a homegrown player that you want to keep hold of as many of them as possible.
Yeah, and like we said, there's a really good point about players going away to England and France, not settling in, and then it would be a big statement for them to come back to the club they were currently playing at.
Yeah,
and yeah, that'd be quite a big statement. If you could drag Ethan Roots back, maybe just for another year, that'd be nice.
Yeah, he can play for England this summer and then come back in September. We'll give him that. We'll give him a little swan song in the white shirt. They can go back together. There'll be a package deal. They went together, they'll come back together. And then they bring Nicky Smith back straight afterwards. He can have 1 year in Leicester, knocking around, looking at the big clock tower they've got in the middle of town. I don't know, whatever else is going on there, that one statue. And then he can come back. We can just keep doing this. Anyone that goes can come back immediately. So I believe that's all the news covered in record time. Do you want to play good player?
We may as well. We've done the news bit.
We'll get into good player in, as I say, record time. So we're away in Leinster this weekend. And I think there is only 3 games we could have done. But really, we've got to start at the beginning, haven't we? We've got to start as we mean to go on. Yes, and this is very much your pick of the 2 finals, the 2 infamous finals away in Leinster. This was your selection, the 2010 game, the Celtic League Grand Final, the Magners League Grand Final in 2010.
Yeah, and I'm not going to explain my third reasoning, but my first 2 was Tommy Bowe and Lee Byrne. So you can make that amongst yourselves on why I certainly picked this one. And I really liked the away kit from this season. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Just kind of preferred it to the 2012 one. So that might have had a swaying bias towards it as well. But yeah, we decided to go from the beginning. I think it'd make a bit more sense instead of going backwards. As much as we all love Josh Thomas and his heroics and that Friday night in Dublin, but we may as well go from the beginning.
I remember this season so well. This was kind of my first season of being like a old enough to really follow and really be into, the Ospreys. Before that, my dad would tell me when they were playing, I'd be like, oh, the Ospreys are on tonight. I'd be, oh, cool, I'll watch them then. And this was the year over that off season, I was like, no, I'm going to follow all the transfers. I'm going to follow all the lead in. This is the first year they signed Jerry Collins as well. So there's a big lead in there. And I was so excited for the opening night of the season. And yeah, every game, it was like what I built my week around was, they're playing Edinburgh this weekend. They're playing Ulster this weekend. They're playing whoever. And that was it. That was the thing I was so excited about. And so I remember every detail of this season. You could pull up any game from this year and I would be like, oh no, I remember everything that happened. I could tell you every scorer. And then it builds towards the finale, the game in Dublin, Ospreys 17, Leinster 12. Kind of came out of nowhere. Leinster were overwhelming favourites, and yet they came up short. What are your memories of this game? Just to pick up quickly before we get into the team.
I was relatively young
Mm.
back around this period. I remember I knew what rugby was, obviously before the 2011 heartbreak from the World Cup.
Yeah.
So it's kind of blurred out a bit the seasons before. Like I remember, I vividly remember watching Ospreys London Irish in 2011, and I vividly remember my mother giving me updates about the 2012 final as well,
Oh.
which was rather cool because I vividly remember my mother coming to me and saying they've scored a try and the conversion has gone above the posts. So that was rather cool. But I briefly remember 2010, but I kind of got in. It was just maybe like a smidge before I kind of
Yeah.
started to pick it up. Um, but yeah, but really nice Leinster kit as well. I kind of liked it.
Lovely Leinster kit.
Bit nostalgic. So I had some tidy players in that team as well. In fairness,
Should we start with the Leinster team then?
we may as well. And I know we do tend to like to go away side first, but
Mm.
it kind of doesn't really work if we do the winning side first, does it?
So at fullback, Rob Carney,
Good player.
great player. What, 2 Lions tours, was brilliant on the 2009 tour. Yeah, what a player. 14, Shane Horgan, Sharon Horgan's brother, which still feels so strange.
Yeah, it's like Leinster from that era. The back line is so similar.
Yeah.
And the Sky Sports News have kind of, well, the skysports.com website has kind of had a bit of a printing error.
Oh.
And it's got, well, I will go on to it later, but there's two number 10s in the side.
Oh.
And we'll get onto that further down the line. And they kind of switched around, so it looks like one of them is actually meant to be 11, but he's meant to be a 10. And the one that's a 10 would probably play very well at 10, but I'm pretty sure he started the day as 11.
This is so I think one of maybe two Ospreys games that has a Wikipedia page. So I'm using that, which is always a novelty. We need Wikipedia pages on like obscure wins over Ulster. 13, right? He wasn't a bad player, this guy. Brian O'Driscoll.
Yeah, good player. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, he was all right.
Yeah, obviously something really controversial happened a couple of years later in a certain Lions tour or something.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Whatever happened to him? Never filled his potential, did he? Never went very far.
There's been
He really got
there's been a lot of tweets about him today, comparing him with someone else from Wales. Obviously, shout out John
Oh.
Davis, by the way. You
Mm.
know, great servant down west.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of tweets between him and O'Driscoll, with certain people saying O'Driscoll's better, certain people saying Foxy's better. I'm just going to sit on the fence for that one.
I was having this conversation with Will in the office yesterday of just like the best. We're talking about Dupont and like the fact that since he went to sevens, he's added jackling to his game because obviously, he needed more strengths than Antoine Dupont, and just being like, but the thing is, I've never seen a back who jackals anywhere near as well as Brian O'Driscoll in that second half of his career. He was unbelievable at the breakdown. Plus, he had all of the kind of skill and guile and time on the ball that he always had. So yeah, amazing player. And his old mucker at 12, Gordon Darcy.
Yeah, the unsung hero of every
Yeah.
that contained Brian O'Driscoll in.
Do you remember the season? There was an autumn international period where Gordon Darcy grew a massive beard, and it was the best form of his life, that period of a beard. And I'm glad he was clean shaven this day. Um, 11 or the second 10, as you mentioned, Iestyn Robbie, good
Yeah,
player.
they've got him at 10, and I think I tweeted about him the other day. I either tweeted about him or I thought I was going to tweet about him, and I didn't actually tweet about him. But yeah, Eastern Sabo, brilliant player. One of those really
Brilliant.
annoying players I was growing up thinking, oh, Leinster are so good, and he always plays every time I watch him play. And but like by the end of it, as I eventually grew up, you
Mm,
kind of realize, oh, right, he's just very good at rugby, isn't he?
yeah.
Um, yeah, you could
It-
just the plethora of positions he could play was just
yeah.
else.
It's one of those like almost so the biggest sign of respect for an opposition player in rugby for me is if my granddad knew who he was, and then like second down is like if my dad knew who, if he was like, oh, he's a good. I remember him like every game he goes, he's a good player, this Nafela, isn't he? And that was always like a sign of, look, my dad's a terrible judge of character in many ways, and we can leave everything else about him out, but it was always like no, you knew he was good as a kid if like that always came up despite not knowing that many players on the opposition. It's like, no, but this guy's good. This guy stands out.
Yeah, I remember my dad just during like the first Super Rugby out of COVID,
Mm,
and I remember watching the Chiefs, obviously coached by Warren Gatlin at the time.
yeah,
Um, a certain Lankland Boschio was at open side in their back row, like good player,
great player.
brilliant, solid. And like a year or so comes down the line, and I've gone up to visit my dad. I think we were watching one of the Super Rugby highlights or one of the
Mm.
games in the morning, and he turns to me thinking, "Oh, that boss, yeah, he's very good, isn't he?" Or he says either that, he's either very good or bloody good. He does there's one of the two, and I was like, yeah, yeah, very good. Just watch him in the breakdown now, and then he just wins a turnover and nothing. And he's like, he's just like one of those. You're like, we both agree on a player we actually enjoy watching. But there's quite a few. We've got a very long list of just super Rugby players that we just enjoy sitting
Mm.
down and watching.
That's the thing, isn't it? That's the best thing is those, and especially I always found back in the day, when Super Rugby would be on as you wake up in the morning on a Saturday and you put it on, and there's always those players you're sort of weirdly drawn to. Like Billy the Roo is always one for me. But there's so many of those like, yeah, like Kiwi fullbacks and so on. You're like, this kid's good. And then when they win their one All Black cap, you're over the moon for them. Um, at 10, a man whose name I am only recently allowed to say, Johnny Sexton.
I can't believe you actually said it. I'm glad
I
this Zoom meeting's recorded.
look, that joke went on for like 6 years, and towards the end of it, it was like, God, I can't wait for him to retire so I can retire the joke as well. And yeah, here we are. What a player. Impossible to like if you're not a Leinster fan, even if you're like a Munster fan who loves him for Ireland. Just one of those players who is very like, I know if he was an Osprey, I'd love him, but he wasn't, so I don't. You know?
Yeah, and if you rattled, then you loved it as well. Like to see
Yeah, yeah,
a smidge frustrated over something, you're like, oh yes, this is brilliant. And yeah, it was a battle of you know relatively young and inexperienced fly halves,
yeah.
which gives a clue for the other side. And but yeah, this is a very young Jonathan Sexton, and
Mm.
fresh off screaming at Ronan O'Gara a year before, and
Yeah.
yes, it's rather cool looking back at all these old fixtures.
No, because you're right. It was sort of this Six Nations coming in when he first got the 10 jersey off O'Gara, and they kind of chopped and changed a bit, but then he started the last few games in Twickenham, and yeah. Yeah. So it's a big kind of season leading into him. Do you remember that the Ospreys used to do a season? The Ospreys used to do a thing around this season called Yanto's Yak. I don't know if you remember this.
There's clips of it on YouTube, isn't there? It's like the
Yeah.
highest viewed clips from Osprey's TV as their YouTube
Yeah.
channel.
So they used to do a thing where Ian Evans, as Yanto, would interview other players in the squad. And he'd always ask them what came first, the chicken or the egg, was his like go-to question. But they did one where he did like a video diary of them, flying out and winning the league and everything around there. And there's a clip in that where Tommy Bowe has the camera and he sat next to Dan Bigger on the flight. And he says to him, so Danny, obviously looking forward to playing against Johnny Sexton later today or, tomorrow, whatever. And Bigger says something like, yeah, he's a great player. Really looking forward to that. And Bo says, that's not what you're saying earlier. Why don't you tell everyone what you're saying 10 minutes ago?
It's
It's
just
like,
like the two of them, I think most rugby fans probably really dislike them both.
yeah.
But as someone that has, seen Bigger from a very young age,
Mm,
getting into the side that was literally local to me, like down the road, I could just go down and
mm.
watch. And seeing him develop up into a ridiculously good fly half, who is still causing havoc in the top 14 somewhere.
Yeah.
And he's now got Garbisi with him at Toulon, which is just like a passing of the torch moment for me
Yeah.
in terms of favorite fly halves. But yeah, like the two of them, him and Bigger and Sexton, two young players at the time, and you just seen them develop over time, and just more people starting to hate them, and it's just brilliant.
And speaking of brilliant moments for people who hate Jonathan Sexton, right? This game, 76 minutes. The game's on YouTube. It's worth skimming to. Sexton misses a kick from between the posts. They put them back with him free. And it's a glorious moment. It's a brilliant moment. Bigger looks delighted when it misses. And Sexton does his little head in hands. Oh, okay. Yeah. We're moving on, right? Owen Redden at 9. Good player.
Solid, good player.
Good player. Just come back from Wasps, I believe. Had a spell at
Yeah,
Wasps.
I think he's won the Champions Cup with a couple of different clubs, so
Oh, of course, yeah.
Wasps and Leinster, so good player.
That's a great bit of trivia to come up of players that have won the Champions Cup with multiple teams.
Locked,
Will
locked in
Skelton.
locked in my useless rugby information part of my brain.
That's
Yes,
all of my brain.
Elton, yeah, there's another.
I'm sure there must be more, but yeah, they'll just come to us both in the night. We'll just be screaming them.
Yeah, if you see a random WhatsApp message from me at 2 a.m., then you know why.
Just be screaming. Yeah. Anyway, no, we'll move on. We'll move on. I won't let my brain get into that. Jamie Heaslip at 8. Good player.
Solid, but he wouldn't be able to do what we're doing now, I suppose. According to
Yeah. What happened to that podcast, Jamie? I I
Can we just bring back that poll? Just let him tweet her again. I just want to see how different the results are now compared to what it was back then.
now that every professional rugby player has a podcast, you're
Yeah,
like, well,
I just want to see what the difference of taste of people have got over the years.
yeah, fascinating kind of scientific study. Um, I always inexplicably hated Jamie Heaslip because he got picked over Faletau for the Lions. And I was just like, no, I want Toby to be playing instead. And I've always tried, generally on Lions tours, I try to not be one of those that gets really into like, no, I want my guys to play instead. But Toby felt like an exception. And I was convinced he was the best 8 out there. And so I always held that against Jamie Heaslip, but he was a great player. Um, Shane Jennings, number 7 and captain. Solid player.
Yeah. You're back to your point on Heaslip. My dad's a bit like that in terms of maybe a couple of years out of the tour. He's like, do I really want to support Owen Farrell on the Lions tour? I'm an hour about it, and he's thinking, I just can't get behind it, etc., etc. But by the time the tour flies around, he proper gets into it. He'll be up for the midweek matches. He'll be like a hawk just sitting down in front of the tally, just watching the tour. And I think he does get behind at the end. Well, especially
Yeah.
he did during the recent SA tour. So yeah, so it's one of those really weird ones. I think most rugby fans have,
Yeah.
especially during Lions tours.
He gets swept up in it. It's brilliant. That's the
Yeah.
best thing about it. And again, a lot of these players coming straight off the Lions tour the previous year. Kevin McLaughlin at 6, who I remember really well as an obscure player who'd won his first cap out of nowhere against Italy in the Six Nations, where someone else had pulled, I think it was Stephen Ferris, had pulled out injured, like 10 minutes before kickoff, and McLaughlin came in for his first cap, having not been on the bench. And yeah, I think won like a handful more caps over the next few years. Good player, decent player.
Yeah, solid. It's pretty solid back row, isn't it? Yeah.
It is.
Good.
Robust. Malcolm O'Kelly at lock. Decent player. He was all right.
Yeah, you look at like the heights of the Leinster side, you've got your Saxons and Driscolls, but this is just a core of just really good and solid players, and
Yeah,
always has been with Leinster when they put their firsts out anyway.
that's it. Speak another one in Nathan Hines again, Lion the previous year for Scotland, scored the decisive try in the Heineken Cup final the following year. Yeah, good player. Was kind of a surprise signing at Leinster, but went down really well.
Yeah, you kind of always get one that goes to maybe an Irish international going to
Mm.
Scotland or
Mm.
vice versa, or whatever. And you're thinking, that's really weird. And then he turns out to be really good. And
Yeah,
Nathan Hines is exactly that.
the Tyke Burn of his era. Um, CJ van der Linde, who,
I, I remember this player rather well. Yeah, one of my
yeah,
first real, thinking,
this
ooh,
is
he's a big bloke.
huge bloke. Second podcast I've done talking about CJ van der Linde today. He played in the 2010 World Cup for the Bucks. Um, yeah, great player, great scrummager. Yeah, brutal guy. John Fogarty at hooker.
I can't remember much of him.
Is now a scrum coach. Um, and yeah, solid player. I'd completely forgotten him. Or largely forgotten him as a player. But yeah, is now the Ireland scrum coach. Was Leinster scrum coach before that. One cap for Ireland in 2010.
Oof.
The summer tour that year. Came off the bench in that infamous game where they lost 66-0 to the All Blacks. So you almost don't want a cap at that point.
Yeah. You kind of especially when you see the scoreboard piling up, you're like, do I really want my cap now?
Yeah.
But
Can I
then
wait?
again, if that's like your only cap, you're like, well, you just want to take the chance now and
Yeah.
maybe uh,
Like,
one of those
uh,
massive dilemmas that I'll never get because I couldn't catch a cold, let alone catch people.
I could have played for yeah. Do I want a cap or yes, but I want no one to ever ask when I want it. And then, right, and number one, an iconic, famous kind of cult hero player, Stan Wright, who I don't know if you remember Stan Wright at all, who was one of the very few Cook Island internationals to make it in pro rugby. He was an enormous, enormous guy. Kind of became a cult hero as very rare to have Cook Island players take off and have pro careers like that. I think it's him and Dave Rennie are like the two big names to come out the Cook Islands. Yeah, nicknamed the Cookie Monster because of his, being from the Cook Islands. Um, yeah, was later this year named the highest paid athlete of all time from the Cook Islands.
All right, must be doing something right, I suppose.
Yeah. Played 6 years at Leinster, then went to France where he bounced around like Stad, and then went into the Pro D2 where he played out for another few years. Eventually retired in 2018. So yeah, had a good, decent career. I always liked him. Always had a lot of time for Stan Wright. Um, and then to quickly run through the bench, Rickard Strauss.
Oh,
I'd
good player.
forgotten
I
Rickard
remember
Strauss.
him a little bit,
Yeah,
briefly growing up. I remember, he's a good player.
yeah, great player. Cian Healy still going.
Scrimmaging on both sides, you can't really complain with that nowadays, can you?
No, and like what became the first player to ever win two games at Croke Park and the most capped Heineken Cup or Champions Cup player of all time the weekend. So
Yeah, that's quite good going.
yeah, done something right. Um, Trevor Hogan, I have no memory of.
I can't remember much of him.
Stephen KO, no memory of. Uh, Paul O'Donoghue, I don't remember.
There's only one real standout that I know on this bench.
Fergus McFadden, who was a good player.
Yeah, really, yeah, solid. It was one of those that never broke into the first team, but
Yeah,
whenever he came in, he looked really reliable.
yeah, just like a brilliant squad player. And then Gervin Dempsey, finally, who again, good player, had this was the very end of his career, had been like a really solid kind of second choice for Ireland for a long time. And then was kind of end of his career here. Should we move on to the Ospreys team? Oh, and the coach by Michael Checker as well, which is probably worth
Was
noting.
was this his last game before
Yeah, he went
because I
to
think both
Stad.
finals represent the last games of Leinster coaches, I
Mm.
think. So I think
Oh, of course, yeah.
yeah. or is it Cap? I can't remember because yeah, I think this one's Cheika's last game, but 2012 is Leo Cullen's last game as captain before
Yes.
retirement. I think I could be wrong on that one again, but I think
Wow. Yeah.
it's really weird
So
how it's kind of like worked out that both finals is like an end of an era of some sort for either a coach or a captain.
it's like how we got Alters changed the coach. We're just doing it here, just doing it ahead of time. That's the Ospreys way now. Is we get coaches out and gone, never to be heard of again. Um. Oh yeah, no. So Joe Schmidt came in after this. So yeah, the yeah, this was his last game in charge before Joe Schmidt took over.
And I think Smith's last game in charge might have been the 2012 final before he went,
Um.
or maybe I'm a year out.
He left in 2013, so it would have been the following season.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So close to before he took over Ireland. So the Ospreys team starting at fullback, Lee Byrne.
Was literally my favorite player growing up, Lee. But
Mm.
I don't know what it is. I know everyone raved about other players in this team and other players in the Wales squad. But yeah, I always had a bit of a soft spot for Lee Byrne at the time.
Oh, I had a poster of Lee Byrne on my wall as a kid. Like, yeah, was a big fan of Lee Byrne. Um, yeah, though brilliant player. And in brilliant form at this time as well. Was man of the match, had a phenomenal game. Kind of the best rugby of his career was this period. Um, yeah, what a player. Um, then my favorite player of this period again, Tommy Bowe on the wing. Loved him so much. The two try scorers, Byrne and Bowe. And yeah, what a player, what a guy. The loveliest man. I met him at preseason friendly after this game. They played Leeds in a preseason friendly, and I think I mentioned this before in the pod, but like all the squad was sat behind, and I got around most of them okay. Then like Tommy Bowe was sat on his own at the back. It was Tommy Bowe sat on his own in like sunglasses, and Ian Goff doing the crossword in the newspaper was sat on the back row together. And like I felt really nervous asking those two, like asking Tommy Bowe particular, because I kind of got through the rest. But he was so lovely and asked questions and was, yeah. And now, brilliant daytime TV presenter. Hashtag good daytime TV presenter. Um, yeah. So Tommy Bowe. Number 13, Andrew Bishop.
Yeah, just good,
Yeah,
very good. He
great.
can't go wrong.
Had a wee next to him at the Munster game the other week. Um, James Hook at 12.
Yeah, it was obviously the start of a fly half coming through, which kind of
Mm.
forced Hook to inside centre at the time.
And he'd scored that infamous try against England from the centre this year in the Six Nations. And they started to convert to a centre a bit this year. And yeah, great player at this point. Um, sorry to be too harsh with the at this point. Shane Williams at number 11, the GOAT, the greatest, the
Yeah,
icon, the top try scorer of every team he ever played for.
a weirdly quiet game compared to the one he had
Yeah.
later. Um, but yeah, still one of the best. I'm not gonna knock off his entire career on one performance because he certainly did a lot more good than bad.
Yeah. An absolute magician. Dan Bigger at number 10. Young, what, 20-year-old Dan Bigger would have been?
Probably, I think, quickly running through my head, probably my favorite Osprey ever. I want to say,
Ooh.
I'm gonna put it out there. And yeah, I just like I said earlier, the way that both him and Sexton kind of like developed in and
Mm.
got going and things like that. Peak Bigger was so good. Just yeah, I do miss that man on many occasions.
I think if you pulled basically anyone aside and asked for top five Ospreys, Bigger will make the list, you know? And maybe Tips or Alan Wynne or Tom Haberfield is number one. But like Bigger will always be there or thereabouts. Just an absolute to say how long he's been gone, how long it is since he left, he's always going to be an absolute club legend. Mike Phillips at 9.
Yeah, the good player.
Yeah,
Hunts around all different clubs. He's
yeah.
he's an emergency loan to the Dragons away from being the next Tal Sally.
Which could happen yet.
Yeah, well, he came out to play for the Scarlets in South Africa, and one of
Yeah,
the weirdest nine pairings I've ever seen with Mike Phillips and Herschel Yankees. But yeah, good player at the time, I
yeah.
thought,
And
and
this sort of
yeah,
a year before the absolute peak form in the 2011 World Cup as well. Um,
well, the year before that try against Ireland as well.
yeah. So what we didn't know was to come. Ryan Jones, eight and captain. Someone that's kind of because you have Alan Wynne and Tipuric now has been lost as a kind of great Ospreys captain, but really was and was given the worst captaincy because of what good job he was doing with the Ospreys and was again, when I was a kid and first getting into it, he was the Ospreys captain. He was the guy he looked up to. And my mum always used to talk about what a good role model he was because he was such a nice, generous man. And yeah, again, a all-time favorite player. I actually have people watching the video, the Ryan Jones Grogs right behind me. This now sits in the Squid Rugby like studio bit here next to Fumi Tanaka over there. So yeah, there's the ultimate sign of Ryan Jones respect is having the grog right here alongside Jazz Joyce and Alan Wynne Jones over on the other side.
I've just realised because well, in my room there's been a
Mm.
bit of chuffing around and there's
Mhm.
been bed and etc. etc. Just realised all the grogs have been put in my wardrobe and I haven't
Oh
brought them
man.
back out yet. So they're all probably covering up dust. So now it's reminded me that after this, I'm just going
Oh
to take them all out and put them back on the windowsill where they belong.
yes. Who have you got? What's your
I
grog
have
collection like?
it's you've got Warren Gatland.
Oh nice.
It's like one of those in like that 2015-ish tracksuit. It reminds me of the win over England from
Hmm.
the World Cup. It's like that. There's someone with a blue hat, whoever that is. Um,
Tykeburn.
you
Will
might
Connors.
Will Corners, that's the one.
Yeah.
That's the one. You've got who else? There's Nigel Owens is there. That
Oh
was like
wow.
the first one I got. It was like years ago, and he just someone just gifted it to me. I was like, oh, cool, cool. But then my dad actually said, "Oh, you're collecting grogs now. You've had it." And there's a really impressive one of Alan Wynne Jones from the 21
Mm.
Six Nations. I think it's like a limited edition. We've got
Oh yeah. The him
photo of
holding
him with
the
the Triple Crown and the Six Nations in his hand. That's quite a cool one. So that's
uh,
like in the middle. Then you've got the rest like scattered around, and I think there's one for Alex Cuthbert in there somewhere as well.
oh
Um,
nice.
because it was I think I got it just as he was clicking into form, and I was like, I really like Alex Cuthbert now. He's excellent, etc., etc. And it's yeah, that's my lot. It's
It's
probably I don't know how much more the windowsill can really take. It's kind of filled up a lot. Very small windowsill.
it's the moment you know someone's made it is when there's a grog there. You know, it's like again, yeah, it's just Alan Wynne, Ryan, Jazz Joyce over here. But I was pre-ordered the Jazz Joyce the moment it went on sale, and I want an Alicia Butchers badly so they can sit together. Um, but yeah, and I want a Morgan Morris. I would buy a Morgan Morris in a heartbeat, or Tom Hammerfield.
Yeah,
Um,
if they did club ones, that'd be off
that'd
the
be great.
charts, brilliant. There'd be loads flying in.
Like Rio Dyer's just got one, and that's how you know he's made it. You know when he gets a grog of himself.
Yeah, and
Um,
back to Ryan Jones briefly.
oh yeah.
My mother loved Ryan Jones in terms of a
Mm,
captain. Like when I was growing up, you had this Warburton Tipuric kind of like I saw it as a battle because I kind of grew up just watching Tipuric
mm,
in regional colours and thinking, why is he not playing for the national side? And obviously, well, we all know why because Sam Warburton's there, and
yeah.
it's going to be really hard to replace Sam Warburton, isn't it? So I was like really confused because I was really young and very naive, thinking I just want Tipuric to play, like why? And every time I'd be like, Tipuric, miles better than Warburton because he's got blue hat, and and my mother always used to say, but Ryan Jones was my favorite, hands down my favorite. And yeah, you kind of really see that when you're looking back at old games. But I don't know why I
Yeah.
was so naive to think that Tipuric is better than Warburton. That's just me being outright stupid, I think, more than anything.
Though also, I think Tipuric's probably my favorite player of all time. You know, I just love watching him. And even in that period where Sam Warburton, there was a long period where Tipuric and Warburton were like my number one and number two favorite players. You know, and to go back and forth based on who played better that weekend. And yeah, like I get it completely. I wanted Tipuric playing in every game I ever watch. But in from this game, the guy who very much kind of mentored him through, Marty Holler, who,
Yeah, great player.
yeah, typically made his debut this season, the Ospreys. And yeah, Holler then mentored him for a couple of years before leaving. Yeah, brilliant player. Always wore his Osprey scrum cap, which I loved. And I wish more players wore the scrum cap with the Ospreys badge on it. I was always a big fan of that.
It's like Victor Matfield with the Springboks as well.
Yeah.
Always used to have a South African coloured cap, which is rather cool. Strikes out vivid memories of 2015 and the miracle in Brighton. Weirdly,
Yeah.
but
I remember
yeah,
Zian Guenya in that World Cup as well wore a USA like flag head guard. Good player, Zian Guenya. Jerry Collins at 6. One of the greats.
I can't complain. One of the best.
What a player. Loved him. What a season he had as well. He was so good this year in particular. Yeah, yeah.
It's weird that you've mentioned him. My dog is just going outside of the garden has
Mm.
just started barking. So good player.
He's just excited. He loves Jerry.
I don't know what it is. It must just been you mentioning Jerry Collins. It's just yeah.
um, Jonathan Thomas at 5. Again,
So
another, yeah, great Ospreys servant. Played about 18 positions. Great player. At 4, I might need help with the pronunciation here. It's Alan Wine Joens, I
whoever
believe.
he is, he might have done something later on in his career. A few lines to us down the line, maybe. Maybe one of those I might have just missed out. I can't remember.
I think captained us once in a game against the Cheetahs, maybe. Played a few games.
Scored a brace that one time against the Cheetahs.
Yeah.
Weirdly, that's a weird game.
Well, we need to do that and go play one day. That's like a
Yeah,
weirdly cherished Ospreys memory for me.
it's a weird game, especially when you look through the Cheetahs side as well, and you're thinking, "Oh, I know him." Yeah, Rabs McSwaney.
Oh, mate. Rouse McSwaney, one of the greats. That's like an ultimate good player. Good player.
But yeah,
Um,
that second, not too sure.
Number 3, Adam Jones.
Good scrum coach.
Great scrum coach. Great player. Loved it. He was maybe my first favorite player, Adam Jones. Because again, when you're a kid and you see the guy, the massive guy with the huge curly hair, you're drawn to him. You love him. So yeah, he was maybe my first favorite player, and I loved him right through to now, Every time he pops up on screen watching Quins for to lose at the weekend, I'm just delighted. I just feel, so excited. Like, there he is, there's Adam. We love him.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
kind of like that with like a lot of former players, well, former Wales players that have gone away, and you're like, oh, he played for Wales, he did. Like I remember watching Round the Pacifica a few weeks ago, and
mm.
Stephen Jones had an interview before half time, and they said,
Oh
"Oh,
man.
it's Stephen Jones, formerly of Wales Scarlets, and etc. etc. Former Wales attack coach," and you're like, "Oh, right,
Yeah.
cool."
Speaking of Wales coaches, Hugh Bennett at hooker is now
Yeah,
Wales S&C.
good player."
Great player. Yeah, good player. I remember not being a fan of him at this period because his throwing wasn't great in this era. And then he sort of, the lead up to the 2011 World Cup, he sorted it out and he was phenomenal in that tournament. And then number 1, Paul James.
Yeah, very good player.
Yeah. Now, forwards coach for the academy. I had this conversation with friend of the pod, Josh Gardner, earlier today of how old I'm going to feel when his son Dylan plays for the Ospreys, as he'll be the first player that I supported having a son come through and supporting them. And that will make me feel so old, and I'm not ready for it.
Well,
Um,
unless Ace Tiatia joins from
that's
whichever.
true.
Is he still at the Hurricanes? I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. But if maybe just for a game or two.
Yeah,
That's kind of and
bring him in
end
on loan.
the
Make me feel even older. The bench, Ed Shervington, solid, fine player.
Yeah,
Um,
dependable when needed.
I think went to Worcester after this. Ryan Bevington, good player.
Good player. Yeah, very good.
Scored a brilliant try against the Dragons a few weeks before this, I think. It was before one of the finals. They had like last home game of the season, as indeed yeah, very soon. It was against the Dragons, and he scored a brilliant try out of nowhere. He ran into someone on the outside. Ian Goff, great crosswords, great player.
Yeah, solid. And we got two former Dragons players we just mentioned there as well.
Oh, I
And
guess
Devon.
so. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then keeping the
And
Dragons
oh
theme
wow,
alive,
and then look who's next.
Tiatia, man of the moment. His
How
last
have they,
game.
how have they managed to put that together? Like former Dragons player, former Dragons player, then now Dragons defense coach. 14 years before it's happened.
I
Is
know. It was written in the stars. Philo's last game as a professional player, last game for the Ospreys, missed desperately. Just yeah, a wonderful, beloved player, as we were talking about earlier. A favorite to almost everyone who watched him for the Ospreys. Then, ooh, Jamie Nut Brown.
I remember him quite a lot, just like looking for the bench and like, oh, that's Jamie Neckburn.
There he
A
is.
very, very young man. And he's like, oh, he's always on the bench. It's like it was an Osprey side that didn't include Jamie Neckburn on the bench. Was it really an Osprey side? I question myself every time he wasn't in the match they scored.
He was one of those. He had one thing he did, which was on scrum fives. He was unbelievably good at doing like a little step off the side that would beat the flanker tracing across. Like he scored so many tries off scrum fives, and that was just his thing. Is if you got like to a scrum five, he would score a try. Any other situation, just like solid, okay player. But like in that one setup, he was phenomenal. Went on to become a referee and referee like Super Rugby
Yeah,
level for.
he it might have been in a might a 10 Cup game. I remember he's either running tattoos in the middle,
Mm.
and someone pointed out to me on Twitter, and I was like, "Oh my God, it actually is!" And yeah, yeah, good on him. Should take up the
Yeah. Did his 50th game in the ITM Cup and its other kind of very NPC variants last year. And has done, yeah, so a bunch of Super Rugby as well. So good on him. Um, then Gareth Owen, we talked about the other week.
yeah,
Decent player.
solid. Not to be mistaken with Gareth Russo and
Yeah.
the person behind the BBC Scrum Five pod.
Though the reason
Yeah.
he has to go by, he has to add the reason because they both came through at the same time. They've appeared on
Oh,
television at the same
not to be
time.
mistaken. There's meant to be a slip up somewhere across over the years. Must be.
There must be. Um, and then Nicky Walker as the other man on the bench. Again, great player. Had come off the bench and scored that try in the game in Biarritz a few months before this. And yeah, proven himself, I think, as impact player in the later half of the season.
Yeah, and solid Scottish international. Another one of those, like I
Yeah.
mentioned with Nicky Hine,
Yeah.
an international player just going abroad as you casually do, and yeah, good player.
Great player. So Ospreys win 17-12 to win their third Celtic Cup, Celtic League title. Tries by Tommy Bowe, and then right before half time, Lee Byrne, and then a couple of penalties by Dan Bigger, or penalty by Dan Bigger in the second half, takes it home, which, yeah, um, amazing work, amazing stuff, an amazing day. One of the real great Ospreys performances and Ospreys results. And I suppose we are, to bring it bang up to date, looking for another one of those this weekend.
Yeah, and it's gonna be right. It feels like a big game. I don't know
Mm,
why. Maybe because Leinster are off so much success in Europe, and they'll be probably smart into the fact they're not top of the league at the moment
mm.
after a couple of defeats out in South Africa. So but yeah, it's one of those you're like, oh, might be a sniff. Leinster could easily blow them away though, as Leinster like to do to most sides. But yeah, it's one of those you're like cautiously thinking, oh, could be a really good game. This.
Yeah. I think we will go out looking to win. Whether they do it is a different matter, but I think that's very much got to be the target and will be the target. Um, Jack Nineber gave his press conference early today. Booth hasn't spoken yet, but Nineber's was very virtually every question was about the either the game at the weekend against Northampton, the European semi-final, or the upcoming final against Toulouse. And then he said a few times, I'm focusing only on the Ospreys. I'm only thinking about the Ospreys. And then when they asked him about the Ospreys, he was kind of like, yeah, they've got a good pack. Um, and kind of, he said two things. One, which was immediately post the game against Northampton. Leo Cullen said that they intend to play a strong team in all the remaining URC games. Perhaps because the trip to South Africa really didn't go well and they've lost the top spot now, and they'll be desperate to reclaim that. But also, Nina was saying that he watched the Stormers game and he's watched a few games in the Ospreys this season and felt very much like other teams have underestimated them and gone, oh, it's only Ospreys, so we'll be okay. And that's when the Ospreys have caught them off guard. And I think that's very much true. And I am worried about an opposition coach noticing that because I felt like Munster were talking about that and they didn't underestimate us and came away with a win. And hopefully, nonetheless, they go, well, we've got to rest some of our boys. We've got to put some different heads out. And maybe they do ease up a bit because I think a Leinster at 70 or 80%, Leinster at 70% we can beat. Leinster at 80% with a lucky bounce we can beat. Leinster at 100% feels like a longer shot.
Yeah, if this game was in Swansea, it'd be a lot more confidence than it would in Dublin. But yeah, like you said, Leinster was 60 or 70%. You're like, oh, you're gonna have a little bit of a sniffer here. When you go to Ireland, you always need a little bit of luck, regardless of what the opposition are doing. But yeah, it's gonna be really tricky. But yeah, it's interesting to see that the Nina actually had a little luck, and like other former coaches of provincial sides this year, not trying to name any names, but but yeah, it's really, really interesting. But if they take a 3 points after about 2 minutes when the Ospreys give away a really cheap penalty or something, they'll be up for it then when they take that decision to go to post because you're thinking, oh right, they might have actually looked at us a little bit more than maybe other teams might haven't, and
Yeah.
and yeah, it's always tough going out there the best of times, and if Cullen says they're going to put some strong players out, and they probably will,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's going to be really tough.
I think it depends on which players they put out as well. If they rotate their front row and they perhaps don't put out that, the Lions front row with Andrew Porter, with Tyke Furlong, and with, he's not a Lion yet, but Lion to be, Dan Sheehan, then I think it becomes a bit more of a worry,
Well,
If not, even if they're dipping. Sorry.
Sorry for interrupting, but the fixture
No.
last year, in Swansea, I think Sheehan and Keenan both played.
Mm.
I know I mentioned earlier in the pod that Van der Fleer and Ryan are on the bench, but Sheehan definitely started. Um, Keenan started and scored. Cian Healy started in the front row with Alatoa, which obviously gave that great scrum when Nicky Smith picked up Alatoa and
Yeah.
sent it backwards. But yeah, you kind of looked at that Leinster side that day and you thought it's not weak, but it's not like first choice. Like support, likes of Furlong, likes of players like that, and you're thinking they might do something similar again. And I could see them doing something like that. Maybe starting with maybe someone younger like Michael Mine in the front
Yeah.
row. Maybe having Healy off the bench to add that experience. Maybe starting with someone like Alatoa in the front row, and yeah, something like that. But carry on if you were having a point to make.
No. Yeah, but that's it. I think if they rotate their front row, then we might. That's more likely to give us a sniff. If they played a full strength back line but a rotated pack, we might have a chance to get in amongst that. And I trust our defense to shut down an awful lot of their attacks. But yeah, if we can't get on top up front, then it might be a bit more of a struggle. If they've got that full, island front row with as well. I don't worry about James Ryan, even if he is fit. Who gives a shit? He doesn't. He's doesn't want it. But again, the weight behind that Joe McCarthy can add, and just as a carrier as well, could be really significant. If even one of their starting two props isn't playing, I feel like that gives us a way into the game and a way to get into it. And what we really need is to kind of replicate the model of 2021, the Josh Thomas game, where if we can keep in it And it can be at that stage where, as it was in that game, where you felt like Leinster were out of sight at 60 minutes or 70 minutes, and then the Ospreys scored their first try, and you're like, wait a second, it was only 19 points, that lead, and suddenly 3 tries becomes enough to win it. Um, that would be interesting because I think this is a winnable game. I think this is a really targetable game, and I feel like there is Leinster can put out a strong team, right? But will that help them if the players aren't emotionally up for it? If they've kind of come off the previous week's high, and a lot of them have come off winning Six Nations, and then they go, "Well, we've got to play this team that we always beat. This kind of a Welsh team will be fine, right? Like, are they emotionally going to get themselves up for it if they are those first choice players? I don't know. Where we've had a week off, and the games where the Ospreys have struggled this season have generally been when they've had to back up big wins, and they've then perhaps not had the emotional energy back the following week, and they've looked a bit tired. And that's something to work on for the following season, but also it's something that can be fixed with a week off. So yeah, I'm quietly confident, but also not confident.
Yeah, it's one of those when you want to go up with so much, confidence in a way.
Yeah.
You're thinking, oh, we've got a really tidy side, yeah, it could cause some damage, but you'd be saying that if you were playing sides like Glasgow or Edinburgh. Well, maybe not Glasgow because they're top of the league, but maybe Glasgow at home at the start of the season, or maybe they
Yeah.
weren't firing so much, and you're thinking, oh, really chance to have a good home win here. And but Leinster's like the different beast that you see in the background, and you're like, oh, I don't like you, and yeah, it's one of those, and as much you want to be confident for the side to be putting in a good performance, you have to be
Mm.
wary of, the opposition aren't half bad,
Yeah.
and they could easily, they could make the scoreline look ridiculously bad from an Ospreys point of view, regardless of
Mm.
how well the Ospreys could play. They just
Yeah.
decide to just click their fingers, and they running in a few tries out
That's
of
it,
nowhere.
isn't it?
And you're like, wait, we were in this game 2 minutes ago. Now we're 28 points down. How has this happened? But yeah, you kind of like go full send, try and find a way, but it wouldn't be the end of the world if you didn't because Leinster are so good.
Yeah. And there's still 2 games afterwards to go. And if a couple of results can go our way, perhaps if Benton can slip up and, some of the other results would still be very much in the hunt. Um, yeah, there's got to be hope for that. Quickly, to run through what sort of team you're expecting. Um, do you think we'll go completely full strength? Do you think there'll be changes? And what does full strength look like?
It's quite hard to really pick your first 15 in a way
Mm,
because you've got returning players like Lake and Morgan who I expect to be on the
yeah.
bench. But if you're making your first choice fully fit, everyone is fit playing, you're bound to have them in.
Mm,
And but this week I think they'll have them both on the bench. So I had a bit of fire on from the bench during the second half. And you know, you're thinking, the front row should look pretty settled, but I'm having a little bit of doubt of who I want to start. As you said, maybe start with Gareth Thomas and then maybe have Smith to bring off his
yeah.
power off the bench. I'm kind of swaying towards that a little bit. I think Sam Parry will start at hooker if all is well. And I think it'll be another really good opportunity for either Rhys Henry or Ben Warren to start on tight dead, unless Tom Both has finished his has gone to tackle school. Um, which is a sentence I thought I'd never say for a while, but there we are. And so, but it's either a really good opportunity for a young prop,
Mm,
either Henry or Warren, or you bring in the bucket load of experience that Tom Botha has, and you're
yeah.
thinking, that looks, front row looks kind of solid. Second row, obviously a bit of doubt about Beard, and then you bring Ratty back in,
Mm,
and then you've got, if Beard's fit, you probably either play him. If he's not, you probably start with Sutton.
yeah.
And then you look at the back row, so much selection headaches. But I think it'll probably be a Deeves Tipuric Morris. I think that's just
Yeah.
go full send, just cause chaos. And then nine's pretty settled, I feel, with Ruben.
Ruben. Yeah.
Can't go much wrong. Ten's a bit of a debate at the moment. There seems to be a lot of hit and missing.
Mm,
Certainly a 10. You don't really want to chuck down Edwards in an away game away at Leinster. That's probably the
yeah.
last
Mm,
thing any young player really wants to have. the confidence would be shattered if it went wrong. But if it went right, it'd be one of the best
Yeah.
decisions
But
anyone's ever made in the history of rugby union. But if it goes wrong,
also,
it's awful.
I kind of want to see the performance he looked to be having in that first 20 minutes against the Stormers. I want to see that, I feel the way he was playing that in terms of thinking a few phases in advance and kicking and really just like playing the game on the cusp. I think that 20 minutes was maybe his best 20 minutes for the Ospreys, and we didn't get to see it kick on from there. And I want to see what that looks like for 80 minutes. Like if Dan
Yeah,
Edwards is fit, I completely get what you're saying, and I agree completely. But also, I think I would be tempted to start him.
yeah, because in the couple of starts that he's had in the league, away at Benetton, he went off after about 20 minutes with a head
Yeah,
knock. And the same thing happened against the Stormers, which is really unfortunate because he kind of had a little bit of a shaky start, then he kind of settled into the game and kind of
yeah,
got very similar to the Ulster win where he nailed the last minute drop goal. But like the part of me is so negative. Like Toby Booth would be screaming at me saying how half empty my attitude is at the moment. But you kind of like, do you really want to risk, a young player going up to Dublin? It could be a really scrappy evening.
Mm,
Leinster are not going to care who's at 10 if it's an experienced player or a young player. They're just going to go after him.
yeah,
So, but then again, the flip side there, I want to see him start.
yeah.
But it's one of those. So I probably I'd probably pick someone like Owen Williams and maybe have Walsh
Okay,
off the bench, but I wouldn't be surprised if Edwards went in to start because
yeah,
Booth does trust his young players like we've seen over the last few years. So
yeah.
personally, I'd go with Owen Williams just for the experience and not to shatter Dan Edwards' confidence, but I could easily
I
see it starting.
I think you're right, but I also think I'd start Dan Edwards.
Yeah, it's one of those that you're
Um,
thinking, you want the experience, but I really want this player to start.
yeah, and I kind of like what he brings to this team, and I think that might be what we need. Um, in a slight balance between you've kind of got Owen Williams, who's the very like steady head, and you've got Jack Walsh, who's the all-out attacking head, and then you've got him as somewhere in between. And I kind of think that's what we want this game: someone that can kind of play it on based on what's happening in the game at that moment. Um, yeah, I think the other one I'd be interested. I might start Dewi Lake because I feel like this is a game for Lewis Lloyd as well. I want to see him play. I feel like the energy he brings off the bench could be brilliant. And Sam Parry has played every game this season where he's been fit, so he probably deserves a week off. He
Yeah.
probably deserves to lie down. So I think this would be a game that would suit Lewis Lloyd down to the ground, and I'd quite like to see that. But yeah. Rest of the back line, I suppose the two centres kind of pick themselves at this point, unless we bring Boshoff back in.
Yes, well, the draw for whichever one gets the 12 shirt will probably happen sometime later on in the week, but yeah, so it's probably gonna be one of those two somewhere along the line. And yeah, and back three's probably sprung up a little bit of debate.
Mm.
Is Walsh going to be in the full back? But I think Max Nagy's probably got that despite a couple of yellow cards out in South Africa. But
Yes,
but
he
yeah,
can't do a third one in a row, surely.
there's no I just can't see it. But then again, it just Leinster away just screams a Luke Morgan yellow card. No, just
Yeah,
just just feels like it away in Ireland.
yeah, yeah. I think I'd agree on Nagy to start, and I suppose bench largely as you'd expect. Um, I don't feel we're looking at any big calls or changes
I,
there.
I don't think so. I think it'll be rather settled to what we've seen over the last few weeks.
So it's an exciting one. It's a nervy one. It's the same time as the Eurovision Song Contest, which means I will be dual screening it and probably getting quite confused at points as to like, why is Reece Henry just broken into song? What's going
And
on?
the 12 points from United don't go to Leinster.
Yeah. Why have they given 12 points for that penalty? I don't get it. Yes. But yeah,
Why is
that's
Australia playing in the URC?
that's the big questions. So, yeah, that I think that brings us to a close. Iestyn, thank you as always. Um, and yeah, thank you for listening. Um, the game, 7:30 p.m. on Saturday. I believe it's on S4C. It's on BBC.
It's on
as well as
S4C,
Viaplay. It's on S4C as well as Viaplay. So no excuse for not tuning in other than the Eurovision Song Contest, which I understand completely. And otherwise we should be back next week to hopefully talk about a huge win and a lead up to the game against the Dragons, the last home game of the season. Iestyn, thank you so much for joining us. I want to thank James as well, just in general, because I know it's a thankless job having a little one. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Ospreys Irie podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. Please subscribe, rate and review wherever you listen to us, as it really helps spread the word. You can find us on all the usual social media channels or email us on welshregionalrugbypod@gmail.com. And remember, whatever the question, rugby is always the answer.
Sports Social Podcast Network.